Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that the truth has a price, and sometimes that price is paid in blood and betrayal. At first glance, Nicole Richardson had always appeared to be a woman in control. Impeccable. Untouchable. But that illusion began to crumble the moment Anita Dupree stepped into the room and reminded her daughter of the one rule she'd forgotten: anger is a luxury for those with nothing to lose. Nicole had plenty to lose and even more to uncover. It started with a whisper, as these things always do. A quiet tension hanging in the air, palpable but unspoken. Nicole had been growing more volatile for weeks, her emotions slipping past the rigid control she'd prided herself on. The family had noticed: Ted, her husband, Martin, her troubled son, and even Anita, her enigmatic mother, whose silence often spoke louder than words. It wasn't until Nicole discovered what Ted and Anita had been hiding that the dam finally burst. Martin. The name alone was enough to set fire to Nicole's composure. 2 years ago, something had happened, something she was never told about. And now, standing in the eye of a domestic hurricane, she understood why the truth had been kept from her. Martin wasn't just the black sheep of the family. He was the spark that had ignited everything. Nicole wanted answers. She demanded them. And when Anita stood in her way, when her own mother tried to soothe her with condescending calm, Nicole nearly snapped. But Anita wasn't just protecting Martin. She was protecting the web of secrets she'd spent decades spinning. That's when it all began to unravel. Martin had been involved in an incident 2 years prior, something dark and buried. And while Nicole had been left in the dark, both Ted and Anita had known. They had chosen silence. They had chosen to let Nicole go on believing in the lie of their perfect family. The revelation tore at her like glass. But that was only the beginning. As Nicole dug deeper, secrets began surfacing like corpses rising from the bottom of a black lake. One of the most damning revelations was that Ted, her husband, the man she had built a life with, is not merely complicit in Martin's downfall, but had unknowingly aided those who sought to destroy him. Ted had performed a facial reconstruction surgery 2 years ago. Nothing unusual for a renowned plastic surgeon. But the patient? Kenny. The man who turned out to be an old adversary of Martin's. Kenny had vanished years ago, presumed dead or at least unreachable. But the new face Ted gave him had allowed him to return, unrecognized, into the lives of his enemies. Martin's enemies. And by extension, Nicole's. Ted may not have known the true identity of his patient, but ignorance was no defense. When the truth came out, it painted Ted as the architect of his own family's undoing. Nicole felt the walls close in. Her home, her marriage, her family, all built on lies. But nothing prepared her for what came next. The affair. It had happened years ago. A brief, hidden liaison between Ted and Leslie Thomas. Nicole had always harbored suspicions about Leslie, the charismatic and slightly unhinged woman who always seemed too close, too knowing. Now, those suspicions had mutated into something far worse. There was a child. One of the children Nicole had raised, loved, and sacrificed for was not hers. Not truly. They were Ted's. And Leslie's. The betrayal went deeper than any knife. It had existed for decades, a time bomb ticking away in the heart of her family. But whose child was it? Martin, the angry son who never quite fit in? Kat Richardson, the daughter who had inherited Ted's charm but not his discipline? Or Eva Thomas, the girl who bore Leslie's name but had always clung to Nicole as a mother figure? Speculation began to swirl like a storm. All signs pointed to Martin. He had Leslie's fierce independence, Ted's quiet cruelty. He had always been different. And now Nicole understood why. She had been raising the product of an affair, feeding and protecting the very embodiment of betrayal. Rage became a living thing inside her. She confronted Ted first. His excuses were hollow, his regret poorly masked. He claimed it had been a mistake. A one-time lapse in judgment. But the child was proof that mistakes had consequences, long-term and irreversible. The affair hadn't ended the moment it happened, it had endured in silence, living in their house, sitting at their dinner table. And Leslie? She had known. Of course she had. Nicole could see it in the way Leslie looked at her with pity instead of shame. Leslie had kept the secret like a loaded gun, waiting for the perfect time to pull the trigger. Nicole wasn't about to let her get away with it. Divorce wasn't enough. A separation would only give Ted and Leslie more room to twist the narrative. No, Nicole needed something more. Something final. She began planning. Quietly. Strategically. She took stock of every betrayal, every lie. She watched Ted and Leslie closer than ever, digging into their pasts, their weaknesses. She would take everything from them, just as they had taken everything from her. Anita tried to intervene again, urging her to think of the children. But Nicole had already sacrificed too much for those children, including her sanity. She would no longer bleed for a family that had poisoned her from the inside out. But the final blow hadn't yet landed. Nicole soon uncovered yet another twist. Martin had known about the affair. He had known for years. And he had used that knowledge as leverage, manipulating both Ted and Leslie in secret. He wasn't just a victim. He was a player. A strategist. A monster of their own making. And now, Nicole wasn't sure if she wanted to save Jaime or destroy him. The past refused to stay buried, clawing its way into the present with a vengeance. Nicole had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. Every thread she pulled revealed another knot. Every truth came with a cost. She had built her life on an illusion. Now she was ready to burn it all down and watch who emerged from the ashes. The game had changed. The gate had opened. And there was no telling what would come through next. Nicole's silence in the days that followed was more dangerous than her rage had ever been. She had become methodical, not manic, her grief no longer loud but sharp and calculating. Her divorce from Ted wasn't just a legal severing, it was a declaration of war. Every document filed, every asset contested, was part of her growing blueprint to dismantle him entirely. But even Ted, reeling from the unraveling of his carefully cultivated life, couldn't see the full extent of her plan. What kept Nicole awake at night wasn't the betrayal alone. It was the question of Martin. The boy, now a man who had spiraled into anger, addiction, and silence. She saw him differently now. Not just a victim of family dysfunction, but the embodiment of it. The possibility that he was the son of Leslie and Ted had cracked something open inside her. Martin, always distant, always troubled, was a walking reminder of everything she had been denied. But Nicole couldn't bring herself to confront him. Not yet. Instead, she turned her attention to Leslie. Leslie Thomas had stayed low, likely assuming the worst had passed. She underestimated Nicole's capacity for patience. Nicole began by isolating her socially, carefully dismantling her support system, leaking truths to friends, mutual acquaintances, and colleagues. At first, it was subtled out, seated at cocktail parties and business functions. Then, more concrete revelations. Anonymous tips to the hospital board where Leslie worked. Financial records exposed. The cracks grew wider. But Leslie wasn't stupid. She fought back. She filed a restraining order. She accused Nicole of harassment. The court stepped in, but Nicole had anticipated that. The more Leslie made herself visible in legal documents, the more Nicole uncovered. Private investigations revealed years of manipulation, how Leslie had inserted herself into the Richardson family with a quiet persistence, never asking too much, always positioning herself as a friend, a support figure. It had all been groundwork. Leslie had wanted Ted. And when she couldn't have the marriage, she took something far more permanent, his child. Kat Richardson was the next unexpected fracture in the family. Her discovery of the affair shook her. For years, she had been the dependable one, the calm in the storm. But with Nicole unraveling and Martin unresponsive, Kat was left to navigate her own doubts. She began wondering if she, not Martin, might be the child born from Ted and Leslie's betrayal. The idea terrified her. She found herself questioning memories, facial resemblances, even subtle dynamics between her and Leslie growing up. In a quiet moment, she approached Ted and asked for the truth. Ted, at this point, was a shell of the man he had once been. His career in shambles, his marriage gone, and the public eye starting to take notice. He denied it, of course. Claimed Martin was the only possibility. But even Kat could hear the uncertainty in his voice. That hesitation. The same hesitation that had ruined everything. Meanwhile, Eva Thomas was dealing with her own identity crisis. As Leslie's daughter, she had always felt like the outsider, even among the Richardsons. Now, as questions swirled about who truly belonged to whom, Eva began to question the nature of her own existence. Could she be Nicole's daughter? The product of a stolen child? Or had Leslie been lying to everyone, even her own children? She confronted Leslie, but her mother only offered cryptic answers. Blood doesn't define family, she said, which Eva immediately read as evasion. With suspicion boiling over, Eva sought out Martin. The conversation between Martin and Eva was the most honest either of them had ever experienced. They both shared the same gnawing doubt that they were not who they had believed themselves to be. Martin revealed that he had found letters. Old, hidden in a box that Anita had once kept locked. Letters between Ted and Leslie. Conversations about choices, about the fallout, about protecting the children. One, in particular, mentioned a child born in late spring, with eyes too sharp for a newborn. Eva was born in late spring. But so was Kat. The ambiguity deepened. Anita, now the only one left who might know the whole truth, refused to speak. She had grown increasingly silent, spending her days in a room filled with old photographs, whispering names under her breath. Nicole tried to confront her, but Anita simply smiled, as if she had been waiting for this storm all along. Truth doesn't heal, she whispered. It rots. Nicole realized then that her mother had played a longer game than any of them. Anita had known. She had always known. Not just about the affair, but about who belonged to whom. And she had kept the secrets to maintain control. Even now, she remained the gatekeeper. But Nicole wouldn't be locked out any longer. She ordered DNA tests for all the children. Quietly. Without consent. She had access to everything she needed. She had hair, old toothbrushes, preserved hospital records. It was a violation, but Nicole no longer cared about crossing lines. The results took weeks. Each day a wait. Each night a battlefield in her head. And then the truth came. Martin was not her biological son. He was Leslie's. But the shock didn't end there. Kat was not hers either. Eva was. Nicole had raised a child not her own. And lost one she had never known was hers. The hospital records had been altered. Anita had orchestrated the switch. A night nurse. A quiet favor. A file buried. The day Eva was born, Anita had made a choice she believed would protect Nicole from the scandal, from the pain. Leslie had been unstable. Ted had been unfaithful. And Nicole had been fragile, having just miscarried weeks earlier. Anita had seen an opportunity to replace what was lost and erase what could destroy. But truth, as she had said, rots. Nicole's world, already in ashes, was now completely unrecognizable. She had spent her life fighting for children that weren't hers. Loving a son who had been a weapon in someone else's war. Resenting a daughter who had always been her own. Ted, confronted with the DNA tests, broke down. For once, his arrogance peeled away. He admitted that he had suspected something long ago but couldn't face it. Leslie had manipulated him, and Anita had outplayed them all. In the end, he had lost everything. Nicole, for her part, didn't scream. Didn't cry. She simply walked away. From Ted. From Leslie. From Anita. From Martin and Kat. The only person she sought out was Eva. She told her everything. For the first time, Eva cried in her arms. In the months that followed, Nicole became something else. Not a mother. Not a wife. Not a daughter. But something forged in fire. She cut ties with the Richardson name, reclaimed her maiden identity, and began rebuilding from scratch. She filed charges where she could. Civil suits. Investigations. The full legal weight of her fury fell on the people who had deceived her. Leslie lost her license. Ted faced inquiries. Anita, shielded by age and mental decline, was placed under supervised care. Martin vanished. No one knew where he went. Some claimed to see him in the Pacific Northwest, working under a false name. Others believed he had changed his identity again, just like Kenny. It didn't matter to Nicole anymore. She had Eva. That was enough. But even as life began to stabilize, there was still one name that refused to disappear. Kenny. Ted's patient. Martin's enemy. The catalyst for everything. Eva started receiving letters. No return address. No name. Just handwriting that she didn't recognize but felt eerily familiar. The letters weren't threatening. They were watchful. Descriptive. As if someone was narrating her life from afar. She told Nicole. Together, they brought them to authorities, but there was nothing to trace. The implication was clear. Kenny was still out there. Watching. Nicole knew then that the gates hadn't fully closed. That perhaps they never would. Some stories don't end. They echo. Haunt. Linger. And behind every locked door, another secret waits. The letters didn't stop. Eva began to feel watched, not just in the abstract way that paranoid thoughts creep in during quiet moments, but tangibly. Simeon following too closely in a grocery aisle, an unfamiliar car parked across the street for days. She tried brushing it off, but Nicole knew better. Fear had taught her to pay attention. She had spent years ignoring signs, trusting too deeply. She wouldn't make that mistake again. She reached out to a private security firm, people who specialized in digital trails and silent threats. Within weeks, they found fragments, camera footage showing a man who resembled Kenny loitering outside Eva's apartment building, a debit card purchase traced to a store in the same area he had once frequented. It was enough to know he was back. Nicole made the call herself. She wanted a meeting. Not with fear, not in hiding. But face to face. If Kenny had returned to finish something, she was going to end it on her terms. They met in a cold, concrete parking structure downtown. He came alone. So did she. Eva watched from a distance, hidden but present, insisting she wouldn't be shielded anymore. Kenny was older. Rougher. But still smug. "You think this ends with a talk," he said. "This is bigger than you, Nicole. Bigger than Martin." "It ends where I say it does," she replied. He smiled. "Then say goodbye." But Nicole didn't flinch. She handed him a folder of documents, evidence, everything the investigators had found. Kenny wasn't just an ex-con. He had been moving under a dozen aliases, involved in offshore transactions tied to a network that had used the facial reconstruction Ted provided to infiltrate circles far beyond the Richardson family. Martin had been a pawn, a gateway, but the real target had always been deeper. Nicole offered a deal. Disappear. For good. She wouldn't go public. Wouldn't destroy him if he stayed gone. But if Eva received one more letter, if Nicole caught even a whiff of his presence, everything in that folder would go to the FBI. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The message was clear. 3 weeks later, a surveillance team confirmed Kenny had boarded a freighter to South America using another name. Then nothing. No trail. No return. Nicole let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. In the aftermath, Eva finally felt the air begin to clear. She started working with a counselor, digging through the layers of manipulation, identity confusion, and generational silence that had haunted her. Nicole was with her through every step, no longer just as a protector, but as a mother in truth. Kat moved away. The last time Nicole saw her, she said nothing. Just gave her a long, searching look and boarded the plane. Whether she knew the truth or not, she had made her choice. Martin remained untraceable. Anita passed in her sleep, still holding the photo of a child that may or may not have been Nicole. Ted was disbarred. His license revoked. His name, once prestigious in elite medical circles, now carried only the weight of scandal. He tried writing Nicole a letter. She never opened it. The Richardson house, once a monument to order and success, was sold. The rooms that had contained so many whispered betrayals now belonged to strangers. Nicole and Eva moved into a smaller place by the coast. Quiet. Open skies. No more walls with ears. On a gray morning, Eva sat with Nicole at the kitchen table. "Do you think it's over?" she asked. Nicole stirred her coffee. "Not over, but quiet enough." They watched the sea for a while. Neither spoke. Some endings didn't need a bow. They just needed space to breathe. And behind them, on a shelf near the window, a single old VHS tape sat in a glass case. Labeled only "Beyond the Gates." Unwatched. Unopened. But never forgotten.